Journey to the West, an audio drama series. Chapter 25, Part 2. The great immortal then descended from his cloud before shaking his body and transformed into a traveling Taoist. Dressed in modest garments and gently tapping a bamboo drum, he sang folk songs as he made his way straight to the tree before speaking loudly to the Tang monk. "Elder, this humble Taoist greets you." The elder hurriedly returned the gesture and said, "I apologize for not greeting you first. My apologies." The great immortal asked, "Where do you come from, elder? Why sit in meditation in the middle of the road?" Sanzang explained, "This humble cleric comes from the great Tang in the land of the East and was tasked to seek scriptures in West Heaven. We are taking a rest as we pass through this area." The great immortal asked in astonishment, "So the elder came from the East. Did you pass through my desolate mountain?" The elder asked, "I wonder on which precious mountain your immortal palace lies." The great immortal answered, "Wuzhuang Temple on the Infinite Longevity Mountain is where this humble Taoist resides." Xingzhe heard his words and, guessing the identity of this person, he quickly interrupted, saying, "We haven't been there. We just came from the roads." The great immortal pointed at him and laughed, saying, "You are one unruly monkey. Who are you trying to deceive? It was you who went into my temple and knocked over my renshen tree. You ran out during the night and refused to confess. What are you trying to hide? Don't you run. Give me my tree back at once." Xingzhe heard this and his heart was filled with rage. Wielding his iron rod and not wasting a single word, he aimed right at the great immortal's head. The great immortal lowered his body to dodge the attack before stepping on auspicious light and moving straight into the air. Xingzhe also rose on cloud and quickly caught up to him. In mid-air, the great immortal showed his true form, and how he was dressed. With a crown made of purple gold on his head, he had a robe sewn with the image of cranes. Shoes and sash in place, he had a youthful body and the face of a beauty. 3 strands of beard flowed under his chin, while his hair was dark as a crow. Not a weapon he held against Xingzhe, only Fu Chen, a jade horsetail whisk, was in hand. Xingzhe gave up on aiming and began hitting everywhere with his rod. The great immortal used his jade horsetail whisk to dodge from left and right for a couple of rounds before unleashing a trick we call the sleeve swallowing the cosmos. In the clouds, he gently waved his wide sleeves in the wind before sweeping forward and scooping the 4 monks along with the horse into his sleeve. Bajie exclaimed, "Oh no, we're all caught inside a bag." Xingzhe said, "Fool, this is no bag. We are scooped into his sleeve." Bajie said, "That's nothing. Wait till I use my rake to make a hole to escape below. All he has to know is that he was too careless to keep the sleeve tightly wrapped, so we fell out." The fool then used his rake to strike about, but was he able to make any difference? The sleeve was soft when held in hand, but harder than iron when hit. The great immortal thereby turned his auspicious cloud around and descended straight back to Wuzhuang Temple. He ordered his disciples to bring rope, and the many younger immortals obliged. Look at him, picking the Tang monk out like handling a puppet before tying him up on the pillar in the main hall. He then took out the other 3 and tied them each on a pillar as well. The horse was also brought out, tied in the courtyard and served with hay. Their luggage was thrown into the corridor. He then said, "Disciples, these monks are people who have left the family. We must not use knives or spears, axes or hatchets. Bring my leather whip out for now so I can give him a flogging to seek vengeance for my renshen fruit." The many immortals hurriedly brought out a whip made not from the skin of oxen, goats, muntjacs, or calves, but one 7-star whip made with the skin of dragons. It was immersed in water before a strong young immortal held it tight and asked, "Master, whom shall I flog first?" The great immortal said, "Tang Sanzang has no morals as the leader. Flog him first." Xingzhe heard this and thought to himself, That old monk of mine cannot withstand beating at all. If the flogging hurt him, wouldn't that be a sin committed by me? He couldn't help but interrupt, saying, Respectable sir, you are very wrong. I was the one who stole the fruit. I was the one who ate the fruit. I was also the one who knocked over the tree. Why not flog me first? What's the point of beating him? The great immortal laughed and said, This unruly monkey has strong words. Fine, flog him first then. The young immortal asked, How many strikes? The great immortal answered, The same as the number of fruit. Strike him 30 times. The young immortal then wielded the whip and began flogging. Xingzhe feared that the immortals had huge powers, so he opened his eyes wide to look closer at where they were hitting him. It turned out to be his legs. So Xingzhe shook his waist and said, Change! This turned his legs into a pair made of wrought iron, and how were they going to hurt him then? The young immortal gave one strike after another until there were 30 in total. It was approaching noon. The great immortal then instructed, Sanzang still deserves beating for his lack of disciplinary actions which allowed his mischievous disciples to engage in unruly behavior. That immortal once again wielded his whip forward. Xingzhe said, Respectable sir, you are once again mistaken. When the fruit was stolen, my master had no idea of it. He was talking to your 2 boys at the hall. It was a plot hatched by us brothers. Even if he did commit the crime of not being strict enough, I as a disciple should still take the flogging on his behalf. Just beat me again. The great immortal chuckled and said, This unruly monkey, though cunning and mischievous, still has some filial piety in him. If so, flog him again then. The young immortal once again struck him 30 times. Xingzhe looked down and found the legs now shining like bright mirrors due to the repeated beating, but there was not a trace of pain. It was getting rather late by then, so the great immortal said, Immerse the whip in water. Let's continue the torturing tomorrow morning. The young immortal thereby withdrew the whip and placed it in water as everyone returned to their rooms. When they wrapped up their vegetarian dinner, they went to sleep soundly, and we will speak no more on that. The elder, on the other hand, was crying tears from both eyes as he lamented to his 3 disciples. You caused all this trouble and dragged me into this suffering. What are we to do? Xingzhe said, Don't you complain. When there was a beating, I was the first one beaten. You never took any flogging. What are you sighing about? The tongue monk said, Even if I never took a beating, the ropes are causing quite a lot of pain too. Sha monk said, Master, you've got company who's also tied up like you. Xingzhe said, Stop talking, all of you. Just wait a while before we can resume our way. Bajie said, Big brother is making empty claims again. The hem ropes here are sprayed with water and tightly holding us in place. How is this even comparable to when we were locked up in the hall and you used the trick of lock opening to open the gates? Xingzhe said, I'm not bluffing. Nothing to fear about 3-ply hemp rope being sprayed with water. Even if it's coir ropes thick as a bowl, to me it's no different from a light autumn breeze. Just as they were talking, the surrounding area went quiet. Splendid, Xingzhe! He shrunk his body slightly and freed himself from the ropes before saying, Let's go, master. Sha monk panicked and said, Big brother, save us too. Xingzhe said, Be quiet, be quiet. And so he untied Sanzang before freeing Bajie and Sha monk. They tidied their clothes and readied the horse before picking up their luggage down by the corridor and heading out the temple gates. Xingzhe also instructed Bajie, Cut down 4 willow trees by the cliff and bring them over. Bajie asked, What for? Xingzhe said, There's a purpose for them. Just hurry up and bring them here. The fool did possess the strength for heavy lifting. So he went up there, and with each shove of his snout, a tree came down. He collected 4 of them and carried them over one by one. Xingzhe broke off the branches and twigs first. He then told his brother to put the trunks in place and tie them up on the pillars with ropes like before. The great sage then recited a spell before biting open the tip of his tongue and spraying blood on the trees. He shouted, Change! One tree transformed into the elder, another into himself, and the other two became Sha Monk and Ba Jie. Their appearances were exactly the same. When asked a question, they could produce answers, and when their names were called, they could also respond. Only then did the pair take wide strides to catch up to their master. Through the night, the horse did not rest his hoofs as they escaped Wuzhuang Temple. They traveled till dawn. The elder began swaying as he dozed off on the horse. Xingzhe saw it and cried, "Master is so useless. What hardship is there for someone out of the family? Elder Sun can go sleepless for 1,000 nights and not feel at all drowsy. Get off the horse for now so fellow travelers won't laugh at you. We might as well take a break under the hill where the wind gathers good air before resuming the journey." We put aside how the master and disciples rested by the road, and instead returned to the Great Immortal, who got up that morning and had his vegetarian breakfast. He then came out into the hall and asked for the whip, saying, "It's time to flog Tang Sanzang today." The young immortal wielded the whip and looked at the Tang monk, saying, "I'm about to strike you." The willow tree answered, "Strike me you will." 30 solid strikes went down before he held the whip and said to Ba Jie, "I'm about to strike you." The willow tree also answered, "Strike me you will." When he got to the Sha monk, he also received the same response. And after that, he got to Xingzhe. The real Xingzhe was just then walking on the road when he suddenly shivered and said, "This is bad." Sanzang asked, "What do you mean?" Xingzhe answered, "I transformed 4 willow trees into the 4 of us. I thought that since he already flogged me twice yesterday, he wouldn't want to do it again today. But now he's beating up my replacement and causing my real form to shiver. Let me withdraw the magic." In haste, Xingzhe recited a spell and ended the magic trick. Look at the Taoist youth, panicking as he threw away the leather whip to report, "Oh, master, before we were beating monks from Great Tang, but this time we are flogging only willow roots." The Great Immortal heard this and sneered cold praise. "Sun Xingzhe, what a splendid monkey king! I once heard about his havoc in heaven and how even the cosmic nets could not capture him. It all makes sense now. If you manage to escape, then fine, but why tie the willow trees here in your places? I cannot forgive him for this. Let me go catch up to them." The Great Immortal declared his moves and ascended on clouds. Looking westward, he saw the monks carrying their bags and hurrying the horse as they made their way forward. The Great Immortal lowered the cloud and shouted, "Sun Xingzhe, where do you think you're going? Give me back my Renshen tree." Ba Jie heard it and said, "Well, looks like our rival is here again." Xingzhe said, "Master, wrap up your kindness for now and let us use some viciousness to end him once and for all so we can make our escape." The Tang monk heard this and began trembling without giving an answer. The Sha monk wielded his treasure staff, Ba Jie raised his rake, and the great sage used his iron rod as they all went up together and surrounded the Great Immortal in mid-air. What a ferocious fight it was as they gave wild strikes and hits. The 3 brothers each raised their divine weapons to attack together, but the Great Immortal merely had to swing his whisk around as if he were simply swatting flies. They fought like that for half a shichen before the Great Immortal opened his sleeves and once again scooped away the 4 monks along with their horse and luggage. He then made his way back to the temple. The crowd of immortals received him, and the immortal master sat down in the hall before once again taking them out one by one from his sleeve. He tied the Tang monk to a short scholar tree under the steps, Ba Jie and Sha monk on trees by the side, and had Xingzhe tied on the ground. Xingzhe laughed and said, "I'm guessing it's a one-on-one interrogation." Soon, the bonds were fastened and 10 rolls of long cloth were asked to be brought out. Xingzhe laughed and said, "Ba Jie, this gentleman is quite nice. He's bringing out cloth to make wide robes for us. Let's help him save some cloth and ask for sleeveless robes instead." The young immortals carried out the fine cloth as the Great Immortal said, "Wrap up Tang Sanzang, Zhu Bajie, and Sha monk in cloth." The many immortals all went up and wrapped them up. Xingzhe laughed and said, "Fine, fine, fine, being buried while still alive." In moments, the wrapping was complete and lacquer was asked to be brought out. The many immortals hurriedly collected the lacquer they tapped and dried themselves, whether raw or cooked. They then painted the lacquer on the three wrapped in cloth. They painted their entire bodies, only leaving their head and face outside. 八戒 said, "Respectable sir, the head from the top is not as big a problem. You just have to leave a hole at the lower end so we can relieve ourselves." The great immortal then had their huge cooking pot carried out. 行者 laughed and said, 八戒, we're in luck. They brought out the cooking pot, possibly to make food for us. 八戒 said, "Fine then. Let us have some food so we can at least be a ghost with a full stomach." The many immortals indeed carried out a huge cooking pot and had it set up under the steps. The great immortal ordered for dry wood to be piled and set ablaze. He then instructed, "Pour clear oil until the pot is full. Once the oil boils, throw Sun Xingzhe into the oil pot to give him a good fry as vengeance in the name of my Renshen tree." Xingzhe heard this and was secretly pleased, saying, "This is exactly what Elder Sun wants. I haven't had a bath for a long while and my skin is getting itchy. Might as well give me a good scorching to show me the depth of your hospitality." In moments, the oil pot was boiling. The great sage was again getting cautious. He feared that their divine tricks would be hard to decipher, and once he was in the oil pot, it would be difficult to play his own tricks. Anxiously, he looked around and found that on the east side of the platform was a sundial, and on the west side stood a stone lion. Xingzhe then stretched his body and rolled over to the west side. Biting the tip of his tongue, he sprayed blood onto the stone lion before saying, "Change!" It turned into the spitting image of himself tied up in the bundle. His spirit, on the other hand, escaped and rose to the clouds, watching the Taoists below. A young immortal then reported, "Master, the oil pot is thoroughly boiling." The great immortal instructed, "Throw Sun Xingzhe inside." 4 immortal youths could not pick him up, nor could 8. They added another 4 and still they could not move him. The immortals complained, "This monkey is quite attached to the ground and hard to move. He's small but quite sturdy nonetheless." It took a total of 20 young immortals in the end to pick him up and throw him into the pot. With a loud bang, drops of boiling oil spilled out and left huge blisters on the faces of the young Taoists. The youth in charge of burning the fire shouted, "The pot is leaking! The pot is leaking!" Before he was finished, all the oil had leaked out from the broken bottom of the pot. It turned out that a stone lion was placed inside. The great immortal shouted in rage, "This unruly monkey is indeed insolent. He is playing tricks right in front of my eyes. You can go all you want, but why break my pot? This unruly monkey cannot be captured if we tried. Even when we do manage to capture him, it would still be in vain, like trying to catch wind and shadows. Forget about it, forget about it, forget all about it. I forgive him and let him go. Instead, we will untie Tang Sanzang, bring a new pot, and fry him instead as revenge for the Renshen tree." The young immortals took action and broke apart the lacquer and cloth. Xingzhe heard it all from mid-air and began thinking, "Master is really useless. If he ended up in the oil pot, he would die at the first boil and be burnt at the second. After several rounds, he would be a tender piece of monk. I've got to save him again." Splendid great sage, he descended from the clouds before crossing his arms to say, "Don't break the lacquer cloth. I'm here to enter the oil pot." The great immortal scolded in astonishment. "You ape! Why play tricks and break my pot?" Xingzhe chuckled and said, "Your pot was bound to break when we crossed paths. What does that have anything to do with me? Just now I was ready to receive your love from the oil soup, but my bowels were calling. If I relieve myself in the pot, it might ruin your cooking oil and make it hard to prepare food. Now that my body is cleared, I am prepared to enter the pot. Don't fry my master, fry me instead." The great immortal heard his words and let out a cold, sneering laugh. He walked out of the hall and seized Wukong. We do not know what he was about to say and how they will eventually get out of this situation. Please wait until the next chapter.